girls. Welcome back to the Asterisk podcast, where I'm your host, April Biondolillo. Today on our episode, we have a special guest. Her name is Breezy. Breezy lives in Washington, and I have always seen Breezy from afar. I think it was actually Next Gen Conference. I think you were like the
Mm,
host, and I was like, this
yeah.
girl, I need to be her friend. And so, what better place to get to know someone than right here on the
Yeah.
podcast? So I get the privilege of just asking some questions, want to dive deeper into her story. We do like discovery calls before we go on a podcast just to get to know the guests. And it has been so fun just getting to know her story, what the Lord has walked her through. And really, we have tried to reschedule this podcast so the enemy did not want it to happen. But here we are, faithful and true. But Breezy, we are so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, April. It's just exciting to
Yes.
see what you're doing with your ministry, how the Lord is using you. And so I'm just grateful to be a part of it.
Yes, this will be so good. Well, let's just dive right in. And we just want to hear a little bit, Breezy. What is your story? Tell us a little bit of background, how you first started following Jesus, how you were introduced to him.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian household. We started going to Christian school when I was in kindergarten, grew up in the church. And, like growing up around that, you hear a lot of things, but it's different when you make that decision to follow the Lord yourself. And I
Yeah.
distinctly remember choosing to follow the Lord when I was 8 years old. I was at home, I think on a Sunday night, just with my dad. And we were just having conversation and just kind of came to the realization that I'm like, okay, like I'm aware of who Jesus is. Like I go to church, I go to kids' church, I know what this is like, but it's like I have never made that decision to truly follow him. And so my
Mm,
dad led me to the Lord that day when I was 8 years old. And something that's like really special and interesting to me is I think growing up in the church and now like being a pastor and like being around it, I think a lot of people share that they accepted Jesus at a young age, but it didn't really become real until later
yeah.
in maybe high school or college. But I can honestly say, like, when I accepted Jesus at 8 years old, like, it shifted something in me. Like, I
Mm,
truly knew the decision I was making and it changed my life. And it
yeah.
just really fostered this desire to serve the Lord in me, even as like a young kid, even going into middle school, just like desiring to serve the Lord, to do what he was asking of me. And so from that age, it's just been really real for me that like I love the Lord, I want to follow him. And obviously I've lived a lot of life since then and there's been a lot of ups and downs, but that moment was really real for me at 8 years old to
Yeah.
follow the Lord, and just feeling that transformation, that change in my heart even at that young age was so special.
No, that's so huge because I remember so many times as a young person, like around that age, I'd go to church on Sunday and in kids' church, they're always doing like the altar calls or like give your life to
Yes, yes.
Jesus. And that like understanding of, do I raise my hand every time? Like, am I really good? Like, I want to get into heaven. Like,
Yeah, is
that
this real?
confusion.
Yeah,
Yes. So I think
totally.
that's really pivotal. Like the Lord was doing something
Yeah,
and knowing that he can in such a young person's life. Like there's no age or limitations to how
no,
the Lord wants to speak and start planting those seeds in at a young age. So that's really cool. What
yeah.
I know, like talking through your story a little bit more when you're on the phone, you shared that you didn't initially see yourself going into ministry, and now you've shared that's what you do. You are a
Yeah,
pastor. So can you
yeah,
walk us through like that moment in your, I believe it was your sophomore year when you were really feeling that
yeah,
stirring, that calling from the Lord?
totally. Yeah, like kind of like I mentioned, like after I accepted Jesus, I really had this desire to like follow him and just kind of serve in the church. And so when I was in sixth grade, I started teaching a kindergarten like Bible class. I'd go there instead of youth for like my
So
whole
cute.
middle school years. I would just teach that. And I think that kind of just really developed like a curiosity and a passion in me to teach. And
Yeah.
so for as long as I can remember up until being called to ministry, I was like, I'm going to be a teacher. And I think part of
Mm,
that was just like the comfortability. I am a very like, I want to know the future. I want to have a plan, like
yep.
very type A kind of person. And so for me, I was like, this is great. Like I can be a teacher. I can have summers off. I can know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I can be in control of my classroom, all these things. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is what I'm going to do. And so I was like very set on that. Like in high school, I was like, I know where I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get my teaching degree. Like we're good, just very set. And in the 10th grade, I was at this Christian music festival with my friend called Creation Fest. And um, we were in a Hillsong Young and Free concert because they'd have like different Christian artists come in.
Cool.
It was like very cool, lots of worship. And I was just worshiping, and I just felt like the Lord impress on me as I'm like watching them lead worship, worshiping, like, you're going to do this one day. And I was like, what
Wow.
does that mean? Like, because I
But
think
wait.
something cool about like God's calling on us is like sometimes he's very clear. Like sometimes he's like, this is exactly what I'm calling you
Mm,
to. But that's not necessarily been my story. And I know that's not a lot of people's story. And
yeah.
I feel like sometimes God is very wise in that he doesn't give us the full picture, but he'll give us like little
Mm,
pieces and nuggets of
yep.
information, just that next step. So for
Yep.
me in that moment, I was like, I don't know what this means. Like, does this mean I'm going to go into worship ministry? Because that was something I was also passionate about. I was like, I don't know what this looks like. But all I knew is I had this very like deep awareness that God was calling me into
Wow.
ministry in some way, shape, and form. And I was like, this is kind of scary. Like, this is not what I thought would happen for my life. This requires a lot more like faith, a lot more walking in the
Right.
unknown, which is so not my specialty. And
Yeah.
so it was very nerve wracking. But from that moment on, I was like, all right, God, like, I've made it clear to you from a young age that like I will go where you send
Wow.
me and I will do what you want with my life, even if this is so uncomfortable and so unknown. And so
Mm,
from that moment on, I was like, okay, I have that deep awareness that the Lord is calling me to ministry. And that really just looked like taking steps
yeah.
towards that and looking into it. And like, even when he called me, I was like pretty resistant where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, but maybe I'll be able to like swing it in a way where maybe like I'll work at a church, but not be a pastor. So even when I went to
Wow.
college, I started out with a business administration degree with a
Yep.
minor in ministry because I was like, oh, I'll just like dip my toes in. But obviously
Yep.
that was not what the Lord had for me. And I didn't continue in
Wow.
that. But there was still that initial resistance of like, this is very uncomfortable. Like, I don't know what this is going to look like. So definitely walking in faith with that for sure.
It's so good. Do you think that ministry, like, what about it made you feel uncomfortable or unsafe? Like the unpredictability? Like, do you think it was just because there wasn't the set plan for it? Or do you think there was more intimidation and just like the way you saw yourself being capable to do something like that?
Yeah. I think it was a combination of multiple
Um,
things. Like, I think it was just a big deal for me to go from like the idea of being in a career path that's very like stable and structured to one where
mm,
it's like, okay, like I've got to wait on the Lord for him to give me vision and
yeah.
direction. Like, I have to really rely on him and not rely on myself, which is easier said than done. And I think also just that idea of like, how am I like qualified to be a pastor? Like, I'm like, sometimes like at that age, I was like, sometimes I struggle to even like lead myself or figure out what I'm doing with my life. Like, God, how do you expect me to spiritually
Yeah.
lead and disciple people that are younger than me? And so I think there was just that insecurity piece, but also just the recognition that it's like, this is a very unknown field. And sometimes I just don't feel adequate or
Yeah.
equipped to do what God's asking me to do. And so I was like, to do this
Right.
for a career, like, that's crazy.
Yeah. It's so real too. And I love that you
Yeah.
gave that illustration of just it's one step at a time, and we
Yeah.
so badly want to know exactly how this is going to work. Like, if I take this step, where is it
Yes.
going to lead? Like, and that's just
Hmm.
not walking in faith, what he's called us to do, and allowing
Yeah.
us to be met by him every time. Talk to us a little bit about just those insecurities, or maybe just like the way others
Yeah.
perceived you that I know also played a factor in for you of like
Yes.
your relationship with God and now stepping into what
Hmm.
he's calling you to do.
Totally. Yeah. I think a big thing that I really wrestled with a lot growing up, and especially when I felt like God was calling me into ministry, was just this idea of not feeling like I measured up, but also just like major fear of what people thought of me. I think that's something I
Mm,
wrestled with a lot. Was just the idea of like, I want to be good enough. I want people to see me as good enough. And I think something I struggled with about God growing up a lot was just the idea that his love for me was unconditional and my worth was found in simply the fact that like I'm his daughter and he created me. Because I think growing up being very like organized and being very driven, like I was very motivated by doing the right thing, very
yep.
motivated by doing well in school, doing well in
Yep.
sports, like just doing the right things. And I think with accepting the Lord at such a young age, it was like I had this very deep sense of right and wrong, and I wanted to please the Lord. And so a lot of times
Mm,
that would come out in just like this fear of doing the wrong thing, fear of like not measuring up, not pleasing my parents, pleasing God. And so
yeah.
I think I really wrestled through just that idea of being so afraid of messing up, so afraid of what people thought of me. And I think
Mm,
a lot of the love I experienced as a child and like in my early teen years felt really conditional. And a
wow.
lot of that was not even things people placed on me. Like, for example, my
Yeah.
parents, I know they loved me unconditionally,
Yeah.
but for some reason in my mind, because they would constantly just like praise the things that I did of like doing well in school, they were so proud of me, doing well in all these things, like not being
Yeah.
a problem child, like all these things that were positive about me, like they would praise, to where my brain really was like, okay, like they're only gonna love you if you do X, Y, and
Wow.
Z, if you do this
That's so
perfectly.
good.
Like my brain really latched on to that
Yeah.
struggle and that idea that it's like, I have to do this to be loved. I have to measure up in
Mm,
this way to be worthy. And it did affect my relationship with God for a long time. It was like, I knew his love was unconditional for other people. Like I would never tell somebody like God's love is conditional and you're unworthy. Like those are things I would never say to other
yeah.
people because I knew that that was not true. I knew God's love is not conditional, that our worth is not found in anything but him. But for me, it was like the complete opposite where I really struggled to accept
Yep.
and to believe that God's love for me was unconditional and that I
Yeah.
didn't have to earn anything. I didn't have to measure up. And deep down, obviously, I knew the truth, but it's like my brain was just constantly in this place of like, you have to do the right things. You have to be perfect. You have to measure up
Yeah.
on your own to earn God's love. And so that was something I really wrestled with a lot as a young person. And even like in the beginning of my calling to ministry and college, like just throughout my life, just really that deep down feeling that like God's love was not
Yeah.
unconditional for me the way it was for other
Mm,
people.
so good. I think that's so relatable. I know for me, that was
Yeah.
like a big part of my own journey of just knowing, okay, God's perfect. So in my mind, it was like he only loves perfect people. And I
Yeah.
was very much wired similarly to you, where I like to achieve, I like to be seen
Yeah.
for the things that I do. And also grew up in a Christian home. Like parents absolutely loved me. But yeah, there is something that we latch on to that praise and we associate it with those moments of doing good. And so it does get
Yeah.
kind of convoluted in our minds. And God's love for us is so uncomprehendable. So it makes sense that in our own ways, we're trying to make sense of how this unconditional love could really exist. And it's
Yeah.
obviously like easier to believe it when you're making the right choices and life is going good. But like when your life's a mess or you've got these hidden sins or struggles, and it's like, does it still count there? So
Yeah.
I love that you hit on that because a lot of times too, like you can grow up in the perfect home, not that there's ever like a perfect home, but like a family that loves you, walking with the Lord, and still
Yeah.
find these struggles. And I think that's where it was so easy for me for such a long time to keep things a little bit more hidden
Yeah.
because no one would suspect or even question or realize that I was wrestling with those things because on the outside everything
Totally.
looked so good. And it was so good. There was just
Mhm.
still room for the enemy to come up against and start things. You mentioned in your story, you kind of found yourself in a relationship that also played probably a big part in just this
Yeah,
the struggle that we're talking about. Walk us through what that relationship was. How did that affect you? And I think it will be really encouraging too, just for other girls that may find themselves in similar situations of when it comes to dating and relationships.
totally. Yeah, so in high school, obviously I mentioned I really struggled with just that feeling of feeling like love was conditional and also
Yeah.
just feeling really unworthy. Like I just didn't feel confident in myself. I felt really insecure and it was hard for me to comprehend that even like my friends or people in my life liked me for more than what like
Yeah.
I could offer them and
Right.
who I was. Like I just didn't feel unconditionally loved and accepted. And so in like after 10th grade, this was a little bit after I felt called to ministry. And so it's interesting to look back and just see like how the enemy will like place people in your life to try and just tear you down, especially
Yeah.
after God's like doing something big in your life. And so it was shortly after I felt called to ministry, at the start of my junior year, I started dating this guy. And I had no reason to believe that this was not going to be a good relationship because we both were super involved in youth. We both were just really locked into student leadership and just serving the Lord. And I had gotten to know this guy through youth and just was like, wow, like this is a great, like godly guy. And he expressed interest in me. And as someone who like dealt with a lot of insecurity and didn't feel worthy, I was like, wow, like a guy likes me. This is crazy. This must be
Yeah.
it. And I think also it was hard because there was people in my life that were encouraging about it because they obviously didn't know what it was going to amount to. And they knew that we were both like really loving the Lord. And they were like, you're mature enough to handle a relationship at this age.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously my parents gave me permission. So I was like, okay, this is great. And for a while, it was a good relationship. I would say for about like 6 months, it was good. We were serving the Lord. Like it was just fun. And I think it was cool too. I think for me at the time, because I'm like, I'm 16, I'm in a relationship. Like people are going to look at me and think I'm so mature. Like just
Right.
that struggle of like being so hyper fixated on the way people viewed me really came into where I was like, wow, like being in a relationship is like, that is status for you when it comes to school and people being like, wow, like she has a
Yep.
boyfriend. And so I really like latched on to that as an identity of like, I'm in a relationship, I'm in a godly relationship, like this is so good. And so for the first like 6 months, it was a good relationship. And then about 9 months in, we ended up breaking up. And that was really hard for me because, you like anytime you go through a breakup or something in your life doesn't pan out the way that you want or expect it to, there's just that feeling of failure. And I really struggle with that where I was like, wow, I failed at this relationship. Like people are
Mm-hmm.
going to think I'm a failure. This is my fault. Everyone's going to look at me and think that like I'm a bad person. I'm a bad girlfriend. Like all of these thoughts coming
Wow.
through. And obviously like I shared with my friends, I shared with people we broke up, took all the posts down, the things that you do when you're 16 in a
Yeah.
relationship. And then 2 months after that, we got back together. And that's when things really took a turn for the worse.
Mm-hmm.
And he just started becoming really verbally abusive and just very like abrasive. And it was just turned into this relationship where I basically would just do whatever he told me to do to avoid him yelling at me, him tearing me down. And it just turned into kind of this couple year on and off battle of just being with
Wow.
somebody that constantly tore me down, constantly made me feel like I wasn't good enough, which on top of already feeling that way was so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And it really just put me into an extremely dark place where I just felt constantly anxious. And
Wow.
also, I think with just that idea of struggling with perception and people viewing me, it was like, I have to stay in this relationship because I can't handle another breakup. I can't handle people looking at me that way. And also just so much fear of what would happen on the other side of it. And I
Yeah.
was just very controlled by this guy because I came into this relationship with the idea that I wasn't good enough and that
Mm-hmm.
this was the only guy that would ever love me. And deep down, I really felt like this is the kind of love I deserve because I'm an
Wow.
imperfect person. And this is the only person that's ever liked me, that's pursued me. And so I just really
Wow.
wrestled with that a lot. And I just put up with just really bad, terrible behavior simply
Yep.
because I didn't respect myself. I didn't see
Yeah.
myself as worthy. And when I think about it, it was really interesting because it's like there was two options I was placed with. One was to stay in a relationship that was verbally abusive, that was abusive in more ways than one, and just was not healthy, that was basically tearing me down, tearing me
Mm-hmm.
apart as a person. Or I could break up with him and have to deal with the aftermath of how people would view me, the thoughts of just him saying lies about me or just sharing things in the
Yeah.
relationship. Like, so I really had to choose between like being in a terrible
Mm.
relationship and the fear of man. And I was so like afraid of people that I chose to stay in that relationship,
Wow.
which is just a testament to how we can be so locked into the fear of man, how people view us and our image and not want to lay down that pride because that's truly what it is. Like something I've
Yep.
learned over the years is that insecurity is absolutely a form of pride. I've never thought about it that way before a few years ago because I'm like, I am not prideful. I don't think I'm better than people. I'm the opposite. I don't think I'm good enough for people. But I've come to realize that insecurity truly is a form of pride where you're not willing to let people see who you truly are, that you're
Mm.
so focused on yourself that you can't see the reality. And so for me, I was just bound by so much fear of man, so much insecurity that I chose to stay in a relationship that was literally
Mm.
tearing me apart and started developing like my really long-term struggle with anxiety, just having panic
Yeah.
attacks, just living in this constant state of fear. Because when you are afraid of what other people think of you, that really does take a toll on your health, on your mind,
Yep.
but also being in a relationship where every single day I was just afraid of like, I don't know
Mm.
what's going to be said. I don't know what's going to be done. Like just that constant fear of that other person and being in a relationship where it's all rooted on fear. And the only reason I was still with him was out of fear, where it was just very plummeted me into this just kind of pit of anxiety where I was just constantly walking around
Wow.
fearful, anxious, overwhelmed, having panic attacks. Like it was just probably one of the darkest seasons of my life because I was so worried about what people thought of me and so insecure that I couldn't see the truth that God would have
Wow.
so much better for me outside of that relationship.
Mm. So powerful, just the
Yeah.
reality of, yeah, just the fear of man, and how when we're so concerned with what other people are going to think,
Yeah.
it really does keep us stuck. It keeps us in this
Hmm.
place of where the Lord has not called us to be, and a lot of times it's
Yeah.
scary to take that step out because it's like, well, people may not understand, or they're going to judge, or what are people going to say? But it's like the Lord calls us to move forward, not stay stuck. And that is
Totally.
a
Yeah.
real, I think, a real place that people find themselves. Breezy, how would you encourage someone maybe that is in that same spot as you, or walking through that, wanting to
Hmm.
leave but wrestling between the two of, man, what are people going to think? What are people going to say? How would you encourage them to walk through this spot in their life?
Yeah, I think like it's so easy in those situations to get in our heads and to allow the enemy in to speak those lies to us that it's safer and better for us to stay in a relationship or to be afraid of letting people in. And I think that's something I wrestled with a lot is I thought that getting out of that relationship that people would judge me, that people would be upset at me, that people would look at me differently, that I would not be
Mm,
adequate in ministry or anything in the future. Like so many
yeah.
lies going through my mind. And I also believe the lie that, my future husband would look at me differently or that I
Mm,
wouldn't be able to get married in the future. Like just
yep.
such wild lies. And
Yeah.
something that I would encourage people with is that with my story, the lies that I believed were not the truth. Like my life
Mm,
got abundantly better when I got out of that relationship. And it wasn't
yeah.
perfect. I still had to walk the path of healing to
Yep.
surrender, but God redeemed so many things in my life and in my story. And every single fear that I had going into that relationship and coming out of it was not fulfilled. Like the people in my life that I shared
Mm,
everything with, even the parts that I'm like, I'm not proud of this. I'm not
yep.
happy about this. Like this was hard. Like I was just met with the utmost like grace and kindness and
So
just
good.
joy that I was no longer in that situation. And
Yeah.
nobody judged me. Nobody looked at me differently. If they did, I don't know about it and I don't care. But it's just like there was just not that fear of
Yeah.
people judging or looking at me differently. And even with my husband now, like it just totally was a full circle moment when we started dating and we had that conversation of like, hey, like what were your past relationships like, like what things are you going to bring into this relationship, what things are we going to have to work through. And I remember that twinge of fear coming back up of like, oh my gosh, this is like a deep rooted fear I have had since I broke up with my ex-boyfriend, like so worried about it. And just
Wow.
seeing his reaction of like just the kindness, like no judgment, no nothing, like he was just the perfect picture
Yeah.
of just the unconditional love of God where it's like I don't see you for what you've done. I don't see you for what you've gone through. I see you for who God has called you to be and who you are in Him. And just
Um,
like that full picture moment of like, wow, like God can redeem anything. And I think
yep.
that's just my encouragement is that God is a redeemer and that every fear that you're experiencing and every thought that you're having, if maybe you are in a situation, whether you're in a friendship or a relationship or a situation where deep down it's not right for you and that it's pulling you away from the Lord or it's causing you anxiety, it's like God has so much better on the other side.
Mm,
And I just have that full confidence that if God can take all those fears and eradicate them for me, He can do the same for other
so
people.
good.
And it's so much better to leave than to stay. Like it's scary, but a lot of the things that God calls us to do that are best for us are going to be terrifying. But He's
Yep.
faithful that He's not just going to take you out of something and leave you. Like He has been with me so close since the moment I got out of
Yep.
that relationship, just leading and guiding me and just bringing the right people to speak life to me, even in that season.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know that He can do it for other people too.
Mm, so good. I love that too, just like knowing that the Lord has been with you every step of the way. It's like when
Yeah.
Peter stepped out of the boat into that, like, scary next step, his stepping out of his uncomfortability to get towards Jesus. We
Yeah.
always ridicule him because he sank, but Jesus was right there to pick him right back up. And so
Yeah.
it's that reality of God's not looking for perfection in it. He's just saying, like, hey, just come to
Mm-mm.
me and trust me. And so I think that's such a good picture for people to be reminded of too, of like even your worst fears, like they didn't
Yeah.
come to fruition. It was actually the opposite. And wouldn't that be the enemy to convince you to stay, and that you're going to be isolated so that you'll never
Yeah.
overcome and be who you are? So when
Yeah.
you left that relationship, now you're what, going into your like junior, senior year, going off into college? Is that about the
Yeah.
time?
I was going into finishing up my freshman year of college when we fully called things quits. Yeah.
So what was it like going into college now? You're kind of like walking out some of these lies that you believed, you're
Yeah.
getting your community back, you're still pursuing the things
Mhm.
of like what God has for you. What was that like in between before you stepped into youth ministry?
Yeah, I think it was very interesting because every year of college felt so different for me because I got my degree in 3 years. So my first year of college, it was like I was kind of towards the end of my relationship with my ex and just kind of starting to walk out what that breakup looked like. And then that next year of college, it was really like this wrestling point where I struggled a lot with feeling adequate enough to do ministry because of that relationship.
Mm,
I was like, can I still
yeah,
do this? Like, should I drop out of college? Should I go a different direction? Like, can God still use me? Even though like I've walked through a lot of difficult things, I've made mistakes. Like I stayed way longer in a relationship than I should have.
yeah,
And just walking through just like that shame and guilt. And also like after that relationship really being at the height of just my struggle with anxiety where I was like, I'm so anxious on a daily basis. Like, how am I supposed to get up and preach? How am I supposed to get in front of people and
mm,
like preach the gospel or disciple people when like I am so bound by anxiety in my life?
wow,
And so it was a really tough spot. Those first 2 years of college were really tough.
yeah,
And it wasn't until about halfway through my second year that the Lord really just got a hold of my heart and just really showed me, like, hey, there is a lot of things in your life that you're holding on to: bitterness,
yeah,
unforgiveness, a lot of insecurity, a lot of pride in insecurity. And I want you to lay those things down. And I feel like He really showed me that the root of my anxiety issue was those things. Because obviously, we
wow,
know anxiety can be caused by a lot of different things. There's people
yeah,
who experience it and have no idea why. And there's other people like me where I've experienced it at times in my life, but just the intensity of it definitely had to have a root because it came out of the
mm,
blue, like kind of during and after this relationship. And
yeah,
anxiety itself, I've learned a lot, is just this idea that there's a perceived threat and there's something in your life that is attacking your peace at the time. And for some people, it's little things. For me, it was just this fear of man was really just the root of my anxiety, and also just anger and bitterness towards my ex-boyfriend because I really just was angry for what he'd put me through. I was really frustrated. And while I blamed myself a lot for things in that relationship that weren't my fault, I also obviously blamed him and was just really angry where I was like, I feel like I ruined my life. I feel so anxious. I don't know what the future holds.
mm,
I don't feel adequate. So I was really just like bound by this anxiety. And I feel like God revealed those things to me and was really calling me, like, I'm calling you to surrender these things. And
yeah,
so for a week, I just spent time going through things in my life, surrendering them to the
mm,
Lord. And then I was prayed over by a group of people, just praying against this anxiety, just praying that it would leave. And I
yeah,
physically felt the Lord like lift this spirit of anxiety off of
wow,
me. And it was probably one of the most powerful moments I've had with the Lord,
mm,
just like seeing Him remove this. And it doesn't mean that things from then on were absolutely perfect, where it was like, I've
right,
never experienced anxiety, but the grip and the control that it had over me was gone at that point.
wow,
And I remember that that was a huge turning point in my journey onto ministry and my last year of college, is just recognizing that, you know what, like God still wants to use me. God still has things
mm,
in my life that He wants to use, and that I have not messed up the call of God in my life. I
yeah,
haven't ruined His plans for me. And it just made it a lot easier to recognize that it's like,
yep,
okay, God does not choose to call me and use me because of me, because of the good things I do, because of my good qualities. It's because He chose me, because He desires to use me and work through me, even though there's things in my life that are maybe less
mm,
desirable or things in my life I wish were different. And so God freeing me from that anxiety, I feel like really opened my eyes to see that it's like God cares about me so much that He wants to remove the things in my life that are holding me back from chasing after what He's called me to do. And I feel like it was really just a turning point for me where I was like, okay, like God, I see how much you care for me. I see how much you love me, even though I feel like I don't deserve it. And just being able
wow,
to run with just that freedom that last year of college. And it was shortly after that that I started interning at Cedar Park. And then shortly after that, I graduated college, started working there, and then took over the youth ministry with my husband a couple years ago. And so it's like you just see God's grace and His goodness in that
yep,
I was really at a point where I was ready to just abandon it all. I was like, okay, maybe I'll finish college, maybe I won't, but like I can't do this. And God was
yeah,
like, no, you can do this. And I'm going to free you from the very thing that's holding you back from chasing after that. And so you just really see God's goodness and His grace in those situations that sometimes are our own fault. Like I stayed in that relationship longer than I should, but that didn't disqualify me from God using me or his grace to set me
Yeah.
free from somewhat self-inflicted problems in my life, even though they weren't fully all me. It's like
Yeah.
some of my decisions were not the best decisions, but God still
Right.
chose in his grace to set me free from that and to use me.
Mm,
So you just see God's grace in every season of your life, even when you feel like you mess up or you feel like you're too
yeah.
far gone. It's like you're not too far gone for the Lord, and we can't mess up his plans, which I think is the most comforting thing to me, that it's like I
Yep.
cannot ruin God's plans for my life.
Yep.
I just have to sometimes pivot in those
Yep.
moments.
No, I think that's so good. I love even just hearing that, like, stepping out of that relationship and going into the things of the Lord. Like, it wasn't just this immediate, like, everything felt better, everything made sense.
No.
Like, there was still this wrestle and this struggle. And I think
Yeah.
that would make leaving a lot easier if we could see those immediate results. But I think it's important for
Totally. Yeah.
girls listening just to know, like, a lot of the times it's just, I think I wrestled a lot with codependency in my life and I didn't realize
Mm,
that. And it goes back to
yeah.
that, like, fear of man, of like, I need people to like me, I need people to go with me constantly. But I think the Lord does this in everyone's life where there's almost like this season of hiddenness or being, just completely alone with him so that he can build
Yeah.
up and develop and give you your voice, on your own of what he wants to strengthen inside of you. So I think it's so sweet just to hear your own journey of, like, I had to wrestle through these things, but I had to do it kind of by myself and realize,
Yeah.
how do I unpack these lies? How do I speak God's truth over it? And so I would just even say to girls that are like in that place of like, man, this is still hard, and that fear of like, I think I just want to go back to what was kind of like the Israelites when
Yeah.
they're like trying
Yeah.
to get out of Egypt, go the next thing. It's like, well, maybe we actually liked Egypt. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, like keep going, keep pressing forward because the Lord has more than we could ever think, dream, or imagine, which is so cool because now you're walking in it. Like the very thing that you wrestled with, had insecurities
Yeah.
about, could God use someone like me? Now you've been in youth ministry. Now you're married to this incredible
Yeah.
man. You guys are getting to do it together. Kind of just share like the fruit of that, of, now you're walking in a season that you thought maybe you would never have. And not to say it's perfect, but there's also just like this sweetness of the Lord of like, wow, here we are. What has it been like being in youth ministry with the experiences you have to where you're at today?
Yeah, it's honestly been so surreal
Mm,
because it's like obviously back in 10th grade, like I knew it was called to ministry, but I didn't know what that was
yeah.
going to look like. And it has just been so sweet to see the Lord just walk with me every step of the way, from
Yeah.
graduating college to just opening the door for an internship that eventually turned to a job that now turned to being youth pastor with my husband. Like, I just feel like it's been so beautiful to see how God has walked with me in that.
Yeah.
And to just see how he's used what I feel like is unimportant and inadequate in my life to minister to people. And
Wow.
I just think it's so beautiful that it's like you can see the things in your life that aren't desirable, but those are things that God desires to use. And I've been able to, with a lot of people, just share my story, share things that I've struggled with, to relate to students, even like just sharing
Yep.
parts of like, these are things that I struggled with. I struggled with how people viewed me. I struggled with anxiety, things that a lot of students in this generation are walking through and struggling with to the max, maybe even more than I even struggled with it.
Yeah.
And just seeing God's grace in that he has formed me and shaped me through those things, and has shown me that my story has power, that the
Yep.
words that I have to share are powerful in the lives of young students. And it's just been so cool to see God write my story. And it's been cool to even being at Cedar Park. I grew up at that church. Now to be a
Mm,
youth pastor, like it's really interesting. For a while, it was hard for me, going into a position of leadership and leading the youth students, being like, everyone here
yeah.
knows me, has known me since I was a kid, knows a ton of things about me. But I've just grown to see
Wow.
how beautiful that is, where it's like so many people in our church, even some of our students that I was students with when I was in youth ministry, like just see the transformation that God has done in my life, where it's like it has not been a
Mm,
fully hidden transformation, but people have seen me go through
wow.
really hard things. They've seen me go through high school, the ups and downs, college, and just being able to be like just a living testimony of God's goodness, and
Yes.
knowing that people see that God can use our hard moments for good things. Like it's just been such a
Mm,
full circle moment. And just the beautiful part too of like Obviously, I am not perfect. I still sometimes struggle with the way people view me, but I
Yeah.
think it's just been so cool that it's like I don't have that deep down fear of like, oh my gosh, everyone at this
Yeah.
church has seen everything in my life. They're judging me. Like, I never feel that. I feel
Yeah.
grateful that I'm surrounded by people who have seen God's redemption in my life in every season. And the fact that I just get to be a living testimony of God's
So good.
redemptive powers and how nothing is too hard for Him. And so
Yep.
it's just been such a beautiful full circle moment to see that like I'm just living out the prayers that I asked God for. Like asked him to use me. He's using me in youth ministry. I prayed that my husband would be someone that I could work alongside in ministry that would love me all together
Wow.
unconditionally, and he does.
Yeah.
And so it's just beautiful to be able to walk out God's call on my life, but also just be walking in
Mm.
so many prayers that I prayed growing up, even in those
Yep.
moments of darkness, even in those struggles, just walking in just the fullness and the beauty of how God
Mm.
writes our stories, even when we feel like He can't or can't redeem
Yep.
things. Just getting to walk in the fullness of that has just been such a blessing, and
Mm.
especially in this season of life. Just leading youth with my husband, it's just such
Yes.
a full circle moment. I'm so grateful.
No, that's so good. And I hope that, I mean, I know that's an encouragement even for me of just thinking about just when you get to see it in other people's lives, just that faithfulness of where it seems like there's
Yeah,
no way and he makes a way every single time. And
totally.
life is, full of hardships, but there's also these like really sweet moments along the way that makes it all worth it. And God is kind, just to say like, hey, I told you this was going to happen and I'm faithful to do it. And here you are walking in it. And it also just allows all those hard moments of your life. Like now there's purpose to that. It's not just
Yeah,
empty or meaningless. It's now you get to pour into the lives of young students that, just like you said, parts of your story of like, man, I needed someone just to
yeah,
be real. And I think there's such a cool piece in the fact that you grew up there because there's no hiding. There's such a transparency, and I think
yeah,
sometimes as pastors or church leaders, it feels like there's perfection, like there's no
yeah,
mistakes. And so they've seen it and they've also gotten to see like how you've walked through that and taken those steps. So I think that's really, really cool. And I'm just like
yeah.
over here, I'm like, dang, Breezy, I'm so proud of you. That's so awesome that,
Oh,
you are at where you're at doing what you're called to do.
yeah.
If anyone is listening to this episode and maybe they're walking through a dark season, doubting their worth or calling, what would you want them to hear from your story? Is kind of like your final note on the podcast.
Yeah, I think similar to things I've already mentioned, but I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing that I just want people to take away from my story is that God is a redeemer, that He says in
Yeah.
His word that He can bring beauty from ashes. And just that reminder that no part of your story, no situation you find yourself in, no trauma, no hardship, nothing is too difficult for God to turn around because He is a redeemer. Like that, He
Mm.
is in the business of redeeming brokenness. And I've seen in my life that God has used my brokenness in order to minister to other people and even to minister to me on a daily basis, to look back at my life and see how faithful God has been and see just how His sacrifice, Him dying on the cross for my sins, has redeemed me so that I don't have to look at the past with regret and with shame, but I can be forgiven and
Wow.
walk in the fullness of who He's called me to be. And so I think just
Yep.
that reminder that in every season, in every circumstance, God is a redeemer and that you cannot mess up the plan that God has for your life. Like we don't
Yeah.
have that power. I think sometimes we think that we have the power to mess up God's plan or to mess things up in our life, but truly we're not that powerful and God can
Mm.
always redeem it. So just knowing that God desires to redeem the things in our life, but we have to give those things to Him in order for Him to bring that redemption.
Man, Breezy, you are incredible. I love that. God is a redeemer and he can use even the most broken pieces of our story. Just
Yeah.
that, yeah, beauty out of our ashes. So good. Girls, I hope that you were encouraged. In fact, I know you had to have been encouraged listening to this episode of Breezy's story. And if you know someone in your life that you would want to share this with, or maybe want to dive deeper with some friends, we encourage you always listen together, draw from each other, ask some questions, but there's just so much to unpack in this episode. So hope you enjoyed it, and we cannot wait to meet with you again soon for next week's episode.